My next guest is with the Coalition for Pay Equity, New Brunswick's Coalition for Pay Equity. It's been a year since they've been on, and it's been quite a year since that as well. So Frances LeBlanc, the chair from the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity, is with us now. Frances, how are you doing?
Good, thank you for having me.
Of course, we always love having you on here. Yeah. Let's talk NB Coalition for Pay Equity. Lots has happened in the last year, so let's kind of, if you could sum it up, that'd be great to start
absolutely.
us off.
So last year when I was here, we had a significant social media campaign that was building up to the fall elections. So we were asking for political support from all political parties, and there was 3 out of 5 that included it in their party, so that was great. We have a new government now, and certainly we can continue to advocate for pay equity legislation for the private sector, but just the changing in political landscape, our focus is also very much on supporting the workers and ensuring that those sectors that are really in need get increased wages and better working conditions. So that's sort of what we've been doing in the last year, and certainly looking to build towards our forum and AGM this weekend.
No, 100%. We did talk a lot about the election last time you were on, and now since it's been done, it kind of went red to a minority blue. Has that kind of shifted the focus of the New Brunswick Coalition Pay Equity at all, or do you find that there's different things that you may look at now that you weren't looking at before, or do you find it's all the same kind of thing?
Yeah, so our focus is always on ensuring there's pay equity legislation or a law for the private sector. So we know in New Brunswick there's about 70% of New Brunswickers that work in the private sector, and there's really no protection against pay inequity rather. So for those jobs that are predominantly female, done by female, we know that they tend to be systematically undervalued and underpaid. So that still is a problem. So we keep pushing towards the adoption of comprehensive pay equity legislation. But as we're doing that, we're also working with our partner organization, certainly to advocate for better wages and better working conditions for some sectors that are particularly vulnerable. So we think of the caregiving sector, for example, childcare, etc. So there has been recent announcement in the federal provincial budget, for example, about increased wages. So that's the sort of work that we're doing with partners that complements our work in terms of advocating for pay equity legislation.
100%. We're going to go a little bit deeper now. In your opinion, pay equity seems like something that just makes so much common sense. Why haven't we seen more progression on that up to this point? What's been kind of the biggest sticking point?
Yeah, so pay equity is a human right, first and foremost. So it's actually a shared responsibility of all levels of government and actually everyone. So this really should be a priority. This has been a hot topic for 3+ decades. This is not a new topic. So what we hear often is, well, we need more time, or we need to prime the private sector, and we need to make sure people fully understand. And I think there's certainly some truth to that, and there's more work that we can do with our partners to really highlight the reasons why pay equity is so important. But the reality is, there's been a lot of work done in this area, and the sector is ready. It's just a matter of getting the proper leadership to then push the pay equity legislation in place. So we've seen it, for example, in 2009, where the government at the time introduced pay equity legislation for the public sector. So we now celebrate 10 years of legislation. And in December 2018, we saw federal proactive pay equity legislation for the federally regulated sector. So, it's a matter of taking that decision and supporting New Brunswick workers, not just industry, right?
100%. And you mentioned it is the 10-year anniversary of that public sector pay equity law. Is it encouraging to you that law, we've had red and blue governments since then, and the fact that it's been untouched, is that encouraging to you? Of
course, and I think that's why we need legislation. So we know that voluntary measures, as well intended as everyone is, simply don't work. So we need pay equity legislation to ensure that, one, it is in place and protects, and also there's a continuity in the work. So what we've seen in the last decade is not just the introduction and adoption of pay equity, but the evaluation have been done for the public sector in New Brunswick, and then we're in the maintenance phase, which means that we want to make sure that the discriminatory practices don't get reintroduced through various HR policies or changes or so forth. So that's why we're really adamant about the need for a law, not just having programs and and practices to support the employers, but also legislation to ensure that there's protection for the workers themselves.
100%. Now, in the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen, with much of the help of social media, much of the help of people being a lot more vocal about it, we've seen a lot more outrage towards inequalities in all aspects of our society. Do you think that that has helped as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think for good or bad, social media certainly is a tricky place.
It's vocal.
It's vocal. But I think social media is a great amplifier and also a great forum or platform for discussion, important discussions. And some might be a bit contentious, but I think it draws out the issues that may have been behind closed doors in the past. So, we say, when we talk about equality, it's not just the equality for the white woman, right? So what the discussion has brought out in the last few years is, there's even within women, for example, there's inequalities. So we know that newcomers, immigrants, racialized, disabled, etc., have even more inequality than, let's say, a white woman. So our discussion has evolved, and I think in part because of social media, that's really drawn out these issues and has provided us more perspective to hear the stories and to really appreciate the lived experience of all types of workers. So, I think for us it's been really an important platform to draw out the stories, and that's part of what we're doing on Saturday.
Even further to that, and we'll get to the event on Saturday in just a second, but even further to that, do you think that that's kind of helped you, point in the direction or a story that maybe you guys hadn't considered previously, and now you're drawing even more attention to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just appreciating the full sum of the story, and also to have that platform to really voice the inequalities and to draw the attention not just to those that are already converted, if you will, but a larger population. And I think historically, grassroots efforts have been very, very difficult to do. They're really resource intensive. So before you physically had to go to, rural parts of the province to reach people is very expensive and difficult. But social media has opened the opportunity to have those conversations throughout the province. So that's really facilitated by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., which the coalition does a great job at highlighting some of the work and the stories that we are working on. So
100%. So let's talk about Saturday. Before we go any further, it is the AGM at the Crown Plaza, so let's talk about it. Yeah,
so we're having our annual general meeting as well as a forum called Pay Equity Personal to Political this Saturday at the Crown Plaza starting at 9 a.m. It's open to everyone. There's a registration fee of $10. We strongly encourage people to register in advance so that we can get numbers, so they can do that through the event page, the Facebook page of the coalition, as well as contact the office directly just to share your name, and they'd be happy to add you to the registration list.
Yeah, we just saw the page for the event there just on our screen, so we can get a better idea. So for this, why the theme personal to political? Why that theme?
Yeah, so I think I've highlighted, I think the focus of the coalition has always been to really hear the stories of the workers and the lived experience. And the forum speaks to that, is really highlighting the lived experience of the workers as well as their employers or employers in general about their experience with pay equity, and then from that discussion really transferring it to active political engagement. And we're really finishing the forum with highlighting the efforts from members who do advocacy on a daily and what that looks like for them. So it's really the sort of full cycle from lived experience to political action.
All right, so be sure to check that out this Saturday. Crown Plaza starts at 9?
9 registration.
9 registration, so be sure to check it out. We've got about a minute and a half. So what's next for you guys? I know there's always kind of a plan for what's next. So what's next after Saturday?
Yeah, so we continue some of the important work that we've been doing. There's 2 big projects that both Rachel Richard and Tina Poirier have been working on. So one is community engagement. The other one is related to job evaluations, which are really important sort of structural pieces. And for us, it's always advocating for pay equity legislation. So we're going to keep engaging politically at the grassroots level. regionally to really ensure that leading up to the next provincial election, who knows when that will be, that we have support for pay equity legislation and we can get this in place sooner than later.
Yeah, 100%. So if you want to get more information, the website is available at equite-equity.com, I believe.
Yes, that's it.
.com.
Yeah.
So be sure to check it out and get more information on that and the event this Saturday, and be sure to register as well. You can see it down there on the screen, equite-equity.com. France, thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you for enlightening us a little bit more on the issue, of course, and it's always fun when you're here.
Always my pleasure.